Yes, please.
We're good on YouTube, Deb.
Okay, do you want to start recording also? I think it's paused. Awesome. Good morning, everybody. This is Deb Noodleman, part of the IBR team. So glad to have you with us. Hope you're all staying safe and healthy. And we are here today with our executive steering group for the IBR program. I'd like to hand it over to Administrator Greg Johnson for a welcome, and then we'll be able to jump right in.
Good morning, everybody. And it seems like it's been too long of a time period between our meetings, but welcome back to the Executive Steering Group. And today is going to be a fully packed agenda as everyone is, but we're today going to show you some of the process or progress that's being made on the process of getting to an IBR solution. So as you may recall, at our last meeting, we talked that we were going to answer 4 key questions sometime early next year. That will be the 4 foundational pieces of how the IBR program moves forward. So you're going to see some of the work that's behind getting to those answers. You're going to hear about some of the process of getting to those answers. So just as a quick reminder, those 4 questions are: how many lanes are going to be across the bridge? What is the mode of high capacity transit? Will there be a direct interchange on Hayden Island off of I-5, or will it be accessed from Marine Drive? And will the North Portland Harbor Bridge, and that's the bridge that carries I-5 from the southern part of Hayden Island to Portland, will that bridge be retrofitted as was the solution in the previous program, or will it be replaced? That decision was made 15 years ago, and it is being reevaluated to make sure that we are creating a corridor that's in seismic sync. So those 4 questions are the ones that our team is currently running through the data and doing the modeling to bring answers to you guys. And what we've heard from all of our partners is no one wants us to bring a fully baked and decorated cake. So we're going to be, over the next 3 or 4 months, diving in and showing you guys what the processes are, how the models are being ran, how we are getting to the answers that folks want to see us get to. And we've heard from the community, we've heard from our advisory groups that folks want to get to these answers sooner than later. So once again, the timetable is by sometime in late January, and you'll see a slide on this that speaks to it. By late January, we will be publicly putting the IBR solution out for folks to look at and take to boards and councils. And at the end of March, we're hoping all of those processes will be complete, and we will take the IBR solution to the bi-state legislative team for them to give us what we hope will be a thumbs up to move that into the federal process of reevaluation. So it's going to be a busy number of months. We've embedded a number of your staff members into our team via intergovernmental agreements. So folks from your staff are getting or having the ability to look over our shoulder, ask any questions that they need answered to make this thing no surprises for anyone as we move this forward. So this is, once again, we've not talked to you in 2 months, but we have been tremendously busy in moving this program forward. So we have a lot to talk to you about. So with that, Deb, I'm going to be quiet and and let us get to some of the content that we need to do.
Great. Thank you, Administrator Johnson, for the warm welcome. I'd now appreciate just heading once around the virtual table, giving each of you a chance to introduce yourself. And if you have any regional updates that you'd like to share, that's fine too. And then after that, I'll walk us through the agenda and get us going. So if I could start with Director Chris Strickler, so ODOT.
Good afternoon, everybody. I will spare any regional updates just for the sake of time, looking at the weight and depth of the agenda, all in a 2-hour time span. But I did want to say it's nice to see you. It has been a while. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for your dedication to the project. And I'm looking forward to the discussion today. So, Deb, that's all from me for now.
Great, and welcome. So next to WashDOT.
Good morning. I appreciate all of your faces here and recognize that the world around us is continuing to be crazy. And so just really appreciate the space that you're making for this conversation and seeing all your faces today. Thank you.
Great, welcome. Next, City of Portland, and then Vancouver.
Thanks, Deb. Chris Warner from PBOT. I am here at least temporarily. Commissioner Hardesty is in council right now, and as soon as council finishes, I think she'll be joining us, but just glad to be here today. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much and welcome. And City of Vancouver.
Good morning, Eric Holmes, City Manager for the City of Vancouver. I also am here temporary as the alternate. Mayor McInerney Ogle will be joining just a little bit later. Looking forward to hearing the information this morning and appreciate everyone making the space and the time commitment to be here.
Great, welcome. Next, Southwest Washington Regional Transportation Council, RTC.
Hi, Scott Hughes. I'm the chair of the RTC. And one little bit of news, we have our new bridge in Ridgefield going over the railroad tracks. So we're excited about that.
Congratulations, thank you.
Thank you.
And next up, I'll go to Metro, then TriMet.
Morning, Metro Council President Lynn Peterson. Have a great day.
Great to have you with us, thank you. TriMet, then CTRAN.
Good morning, Stephen Witter from TriMet. It's just great to be here and look forward to the conversation. Thanks.
Great, welcome. CTRAN, and then Port of Portland.
Hi, Monica Diaz-Fowler sitting in for Sean Donaghy today. Happy to be here and listen to what you have to update us on.
Great, welcome. Port of Portland.
Good morning, Kristen Leonard with the Port of Portland, and I appreciate all the work over the last couple months and today's discussion.
Thank you, welcome. Port of Vancouver.
Good morning, Jack Berkman, Commissioner with the Port. Our Board of Commissioners passed a resolution supporting the I-5 Bridge Replacement Project. It's another resolution because we'd passed one with a previous project, but we thought it was important to refresh it. And we're stating that our port supports these efforts to continue the design process for the bridge replacement with high capacity transit and a dedicated guideway. And then it has a couple of other statements supporting the process that we're going through and, of course, supporting more funding.
Really appreciate that. Thank you so much and welcome. And so then next, if I could go to the CAG co-chairs. So that's our Community Advisory Group co-chairs. So glad to have you with us, Lynn Ballantyre.
Thank you. First of all, just a shout out, noting the bridge got built in Ridgefield. Any bridge is a good bridge, so hopefully that sets us on a great trajectory. So thank you for that. I will just say that for both my co-chair and I, we've been doing one-on-one interviews with the 32 CAG members, and in order to ensure that individual as well as small group and collective voices are heard, and reinforcing the process and the messages and getting a pulse check. So that's been time consuming, but invaluable.
Appreciate all that effort. Thank you for the report out. And Ed Washington.
Yes, happy to be here. I don't have any updates, but I'm just happy to be here to listen and learn. Thank you very much.
Welcome aboard to all of you today, Executive Steering Group members. And Josh, if you could help me, I've got just a few slides, both introductory as well as highlighting our agenda topics. So I do know we've all been in this virtual world for a while, so I'll move through these quickly. But first of all, we do have closed caption available. And I think today we're having a little bit of trouble with it in the YouTube and the Zoom. And so we're hoping that for some people that can't see it, that you can go to the external URL. So it's https with backslashes IBR News /captions. So you see that down at the left there. And if you're having trouble finding it in the Zoom webinar, then go ahead and click on that and it'll give you closed captions below. Okay, next slide. So just a couple of reminders. One is, first and foremost, thank you everybody for joining us today. We encourage panelists to keep your video on so we get that feeling of being at a table together. Please remembering to keep your audio on mute when not speaking. And before speaking, if you could please state your name and affiliation to help attendees identify who is talking. If you experience any technical difficulties, please contact program staff at 360-329-6744. For the public, we are grateful to have you with us. You are in listening mode as you observe the meeting. There will be an opportunity to provide brief public input later in the meeting today. To submit your input after the meeting, please email your comments to info@interstatebridge.org with ESG Public Comment in the subject line. You can also call 888-503-6735 and state ESG Public Comment in your message. Okay, so now I just have a few bits. We've already had our welcomes. We've had our regional updates. I'm here today as your IBR facilitator. Next slide. And the agenda topics. As Administrator Johnson said, we have a really full agenda, and we're really excited to bring these topics to you today. We first have about a half hour with an informational update and to confirm understanding about the approach and rationale for reconfirming bridge replacement as a corridor solution. So we'll walk you through the information. We'll make sure to leave time with you as ESG members for any clarifying questions or any input that you'd like to provide. And then most importantly, as an outcome, we're looking for that understanding and confirmation regarding the rationale for the approach going forward. And then the bulk of the time today is spent on both information and feedback regarding progress on technical work towards an IBR solution. So as Administrator Johnson said, there has been a huge push, both with program partners and the IBR program, and we're grateful for all the hard work together, along with input from our advisory groups, with our communities of concern, with our publics, and with specific community working groups to really make this as robust of a technical work progress as possible that is representative of the region. So today we have a number of key updates. We are really interested in your input and feedback, and your lens as ESG members is critical to success of this program. So we look forward to working together today. We then, as always, leave time for opportunity for public input, 10 minutes towards the end of the meeting. We'll do wrap up to confirm upcoming meeting topics, next steps, and adjourn no later than 1 o'clock. So a few reminders with ground rules about honoring the agenda, remembering to listen to understand, ask questions to clarify, hard on the problems and soft on the people. We want your diverse interests represented. We want your pushback on the substance, and we just have gentle reminders to stay kind to each other as we do so. Addressing interests wherever possible, understanding yours, mine, and our interests here. How do we represent the region and seeking common ground together and outcomes that work for everyone? And then that last important one about balance of speaking time, remembering if you tend to speak a lot, leaning back a little bit. If you're on the quieter side, leaning in. All right, so I think we're ready to go. And on this first topic,
well, Deb, this is,
go ahead, Greg.
we're going to have Ray Mabey, our deputy program administrator, run us through some of the replacement solutions that have been out there and things that that we have found in investigating these things. So Ray Mabey is our deputy, so I'll flip it over to Ray.
Thank you, Administrator Johnson. As Administrator Johnson said, I'm Ray Mabey, Assistant Program Administrator for the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. Happy to be here today. Let's move, yeah, perfect. So in recent months, the program's received input from individuals and stakeholders requesting we consider different solutions to address the program's purpose and need. In reaction to that, the program team has taken an in-depth look at these proposed solutions and documented their findings and analysis in 4 different memos. A cover memo that frames the work and the 4 memos I just mentioned are available on our website. The link is there. interstatebridge.org/library under our environmental documents. Today is a synopsis of that information and confirmation that you all understand what we did and why. Those 4 alternatives or solutions I mentioned are a third bridge or third or supplemental bridge, a high-speed rail solution, common sense alternative 2, and an immersed tube tunnel. We're not surprised these concepts are resurfacing. They or forms of them were studied and dismissed in the previous effort. Next slide, please. So as a reminder, we discussed the 4 NEPA pathways with you last May. And this body had full consensus that the program should try and utilize past work and stick to what we had as there as paths 2 or 3, which were supplemental environmental impact statements. All of the dismissed solutions we are talking about today would go against that general direction. Consistent with FHWA and FTA's guidance, and in the interest of maximizing the use of our past investments, the program's updating and improving upon that past work. CRC and the project partners established a locally preferred alternative that met the purpose and need that was defined. Also, a record of decision was issued for this work from our federal partners. Any alternative that be considered has to meet each of those 6 needs, and those 6 needs are listed here: growing travel demand and congestion, impaired freight movement, limited public transportation operation, connectivity, and reliability, safety and vulnerability of incidents, substandard bicycle and pedestrian facilities, and seismic vulnerability of the I-5 bridge. None of the 4 solutions we are discussing today meet all of those 6 needs. And I'll step through at a high level of those key findings in the next couple of slides. Next slide, please. So starting, maybe I'll step back a bit. Our main focus in these findings in these next couple of slides is to focus on how the solutions measure up against the purpose and need, but not all the other complexities, impacts, and challenges these solutions pose. What we'll see is that many of them don't address active transportation needs or safety concerns, congestion conditions, and seismic vulnerability. So the first one is the third bridge. The basic elements of this solution are to build a third bridge across the Columbia on a different alignment and leave the existing bridges in place. And that has several things resulting from that. Leaves the existing bridges, so they continue to have the seismic vulnerability issues. Bridgeless would continue with safety and congestion issues would still remain, and active transportation needs would remain unaddressed. In the high-speed rail, it would have, it would typically high-speed rail is designed for long-distance travel and speeds in excess of 150 miles an hour. And we wouldn't connect the cities of Portland, Portland, Vancouver in that situation. The safety deficiencies would remain for the I-5 corridor because they would remain in place. They would not address our active transportation needs. And seismic vulnerability remain, as well as bridgeless, because existing bridges would still be there. Next slide, please. Next two are the common sense alternative and the nurse tube tunnel. In the common sense alternative, that's solution is comprised of installing a lift span on the private Burlington Northern Santa Fe Rail Bridge, repurposing the existing I-5 bridges for local traffic, and constructing new bridges to carry I-5 between North Portland and Hayden Island and Vancouver. That span over the main crossing, main river, would be also include a Passcode span, so another movable span. So with this solution, we still have bridge lifts on the existing span not only for river traffic, but for maintenance lifts. The seismic vulnerability of those bridges would still be in place. And the safety and congestion issues would be met. And then lastly, the immersed tube tunnel. That solution consists of replacing existing bridges with tunnel sections that are built off-site and then placed in an open trench and covered across the river. The depth of this type of installation would result in daylighting the ends of the tunnel north of Vancouver, of downtown Vancouver, and south of Hayden Island, which would preclude us connecting to those important destinations. It would cost approximately twice as much as a replacement bridge, and we still have safety concerns besides significant and additional impacts to natural and cultural resources. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, the analysis and screening conducted during the CRC that dismissed these alternatives and solutions is still valid. And while these options are not moving forward as a solution for IBR, our work doesn't preclude others from moving forward on high-speed rail or third bridge concepts. And once again, I'd like to say that these memos documenting this work in detail can be found on our website, listed there at the bottom of the page. And I know I went through that pretty fast, but we want to open up time for you to ask questions. I have, I think, the broader team of IBR available to be able to ask some detailed questions if you have them.
So I'd just like to jump in before we start the question and answer that Ray did a great job of outlining these alternative solutions that are out there. We don't dismiss these lightly. We recognize there's a lot of passion and a lot of effort that's gone behind these. So we know that folks are serious when they bring these things to the table. But once again, we have spent a tremendous amount of effort looking into these issues and whether they would meet the stated purpose and need that this group has said, yes, this is where we want to carry the program forward. So once again, we're not dismissing these ideas as not worthy of regional conversations, but it is just not a solution for the I-5 corridor. So Deb, with that, we'll flip it over to you for any questions or group discussion.
Great, appreciate it, Ray, and thank you, Greg. So ESG members, any clarifying questions, anything to help confirm your understanding as well as the rationale for why these are solutions that do not meet purpose and need? And this was kind of a quick check-in. So I wasn't going to do the once around the table. It's just going to see if there are any hands that come up, if anybody has either a question or a comment in this section. I think I saw President Peterson. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to the project team for re-looking at these ideas that have come up over the years. They were certainly many of them were part and parcel of the last look and the last go around. And so just being able to make sure that as conditions have changed over time, that we made that one last look, I think is very much appreciated. And it doesn't mean that they weren't good ideas, but they don't meet all of the purpose and need of what we're trying to accommodate here and solve for here. So I just, again, I appreciate the time and energy that went into making sure that we did that one last look at these ideas.
Appreciate it, thank you. Any others? Reflection, clarifying questions, feedback? Okay, well, thank you to the team for the great work. Thank you, program. Thank you, ESG members. And to our audience here, please remember all of this information is posted on the website, both the cover memo with the explanation as well as the analysis memos. And I did not get a chance to mention at the beginning of the meeting, this slide deck that you're looking at will also be posted to the website right after the meeting. We always do a meeting summary, and we'll make sure all those materials are available for people. In addition, I didn't get a chance to mention that all public comment received to date has already been shared with our ESG members, and that also gets posted to the website. So great on this topic and much appreciated. So we're moving on to the next topic for the meeting, which is an information and feedback opportunity on progress on technical work towards an IBR solution. And Administrator Johnson, if you could help warm up the topic for us.
Thank you, Deb. So there's been a tremendous amount of work that has been going on since early summer to get us to where an IBR solution can be put on the table for early next year. So what you're going to hear is a summation of some of that work. We're going to talk about how we are receiving information. We're going to talk about our working groups that have been established to help us get to answers. We've established 4 working groups. We have a commuter working group, a working group on active transportation, looking at the biking, walking. We also have a working group for Hayden Island and a working group for downtown Vancouver. And what I want to make sure is folks understand these are not the final answers of what this thing is going to look like. There's going to be plenty more opportunities for input and engagement, but we are trying to establish the 4 essential pillars of this program so we can move to our next step with our federal partners. But there are a lot of details of how this program will move forward that are not ripe yet for discussion. We have to talk about the what at this point. So what you're going to hear is the what. What is it that we're looking at? What are some of the design options? What are some of the screening criteria that are going to help us get to that IBR solution? So with that, I'd like to introduce John Willis. John is our Deputy Program Manager or Deputy Project Manager. And John is going to walk us through some of the work that's been done over the last number of months. So John.
Thanks, Administrator Johnson. As mentioned, we have a long-term work plan that's going to get us to 2025 construction and beyond. What you see here is a short-term work plan that just looks out for the next few months. I'm going to highlight a few of the big chunks and the engagement of this group here. I'll start with the blue box to the upper left that talks about identifying desired outcomes and defining screening criteria. Our team's been at work on that for several months, even before what's showing here, well before May. And you'll hear Chris Regan talk about that in just a few moments. While that's been going on, our team has looked to identify the range of design options to evaluate and then developing those design options in concert with the screening criteria as we approach the end of October, just a few weeks away. In that time frame, we will be looking to seek agreement in principle around desired outcomes and screening process, as well as refining that refined list of options that will be evaluated. The months of November and December are going to be focused on screening those design options and developing a recommendation based on technical feedback. That technical feedback will look at trade-offs as far as screening goes and help us, this group and others, with that conversation to knit that together into a unified multimodal design. We will then spend the spring of 2022 developing that solution. That's in collaboration with all of you and stakeholders to reach consensus on what that solution is. And then with that feedback, Administrator Johnson will be speaking to the Bi-State Legislative Committee in the end of March with that solution, with those 4 big questions that he mentioned earlier. We will then take that feedback from all of that work and refine that solution to a point where we can enter into the NEPA process. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Regan to talk about desired outcomes and screening criteria.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. Hi, my name is Chris Regan. I am the environmental manager for the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. Great to be with you again, talking a little bit more about how we're advancing our IBR solution to get it ready for our NEPA process. Next slide, please. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. And so this first slide might look familiar. We've had this conversation with you before, but it's important to make sure that we frame our conversation on what we're doing on developing an IBR solution for the region. The most important thing to recognize is there is a number of previous work that has been done that helps feed into how we frame the conversation for the IBR solution. We're looking at purpose and need and our vision and values, climate framework, the equity framework, the community advisory group, community values and priorities that have been developed. We're seeking agency partner engagement and input, engaging with technical experts, and having community engagement that help feed in to how we frame looking at what an IBR solution will do for the region. This feeds into what are our program desired outcomes. And those desired outcomes are observable and measurable accomplishments for the IBR program. What are the specific program level performance measures, which are indicators to measure the IBR program success over the lifespan of the program? That is from today all the way to the end and beyond construction. And then we're looking at design option screening criteria. These screening criteria will be used as requirements to assess the trade-offs or potential impacts among the design options that will be considered to address the changes that have occurred. Next slide, please. So where are we right now? The current work of the program is focused on developing design options to respond to change. We needed a little bit of the baseline understanding those concepts so that we could understand what our data needs were, how we're going to focus on what the potential impacts might be. And as we're working on those design concepts, we're also developing screening criteria to advance our desired outcomes for the program. We're working with partners, with our community advisory group, the equity advisory group, so that we can coalesce around how those desired outcomes and screening criteria housed in the screening matrix will lead to the IBR solution. A lot of our work in that screening matrix right now is defining those connections so that you can see how we're going to screen those options and get us to the program solution to advance our region's desired outcomes. We're going to continue to refine that matrix with our partners and bring it back to the ESG at the next ESG meeting on October 21st, 2021, to seek alignment at a conceptual level and to get agreement in principle over that tool. This is an iterative process, and we will continue to work on it as we advance with our partners to get to the IBR solution. Next slide, please. So where are we going? What are we trying to accomplish? Right now, program staff are working with the partners to establish this framework that maps the desired outcomes to the program level performance measures and those design option screening criteria, showing that linkage between them all. We're working with our partners to translate aspirational outcomes into more specific metrics. We're refining the design option screening criteria based on those desired outcomes, and we're developing tailored screening matrices for each set of design options so that we can differentiate performance, benefits, and impacts and show where those trade-offs are as we advance to the IBR solution. That's about it for me, and I'm going to hand this back over to John.
Thank you, Chris. I'm going to spend the next few minutes providing a little more detail on the development of the design options, and those design options, preliminary design options that will be supporting the screening process that Chris just spoke to. Next slide, please. So a little bit of where we've been and where we're going. In the spring and summer of this year, we were working with our partners to understand the changes, both physical and contextual, since the past project, to identify possible design options to study and evaluate in response to those changes. During the summer, we took a deep dive, and I'll describe that a little bit more later, working collaboratively with all of you and your staff and other stakeholders to develop desired outcomes, the screening criteria that Chris just mentioned, along with those metrics, as well as the preliminary list of design options. And through the rest of the summer, we're here in September now, and into fall, those technical sessions with the partners will be used to refine the options and get them ready for that screening and evaluation. And a big part of that is the modeling work that our team is doing to provide the data that Administrator Johnson has said will be used quite heavily on this program. Next slide, please. I did mention robust engagement as we develop the design options. The partner agencies, all of the group here with the ESG, as well as ongoing engagement with embedded partner agency staff. And that's there have been a variety of venues and tools to do that, including the newly formed project managers group, as well as the staff level group that we've been working with. We've also very aggressively over the summer engaged technical work sessions on the topics you see below. We also have the advisory groups that are providing great input for our design team, the equity advisory group and the community advisory group. Thank you, Lynn and Ed, for that feedback and input. That's been very helpful for our team. Additionally, we are engaging the community. We talked about standing up those community working groups. You can see those below. Those are just a few weeks on board, as well as planned community engagement events in the fall to bring that feedback into our design team. Next slide, please. So here's the list. We wanted to share this list of where we are. We had the goal to have the universe of design options identified by the end of August, and we got there with the help of your team. It has been phenomenal working with your staff to help us get there. We developed those options to be responsive to changes. You can see the big categories here: the river crossing and alignment, looking at replacement bridge configuration, including through lanes, auxiliary lanes, and with a variety of options, including what you can see below. Interchange improvements in roadway sections. We're looking at roads, interchanges, transit, active transportation, and those options are also combined as shown below. The replacement of the North Portland Harbor Bridge that was mentioned earlier. We have to do additional work to identify the impacts and considerations of replacing this bridge, and that has impacts going beyond that site. And transit options. I'll take a little dive in just a few minutes here on transit. We've been doing a lot of work since we last spoke on transit. Multiple high capacity options, including those in dedicated guideway with the options listed below. A lot of iterations on those as well. And finally, active transportation improvements. I just want to pause and say all of our design options will include and have additional detail on active transportation and how those connections with the rest of our regional systems. You'll see that before we get to screening as we define the design options. Next slide, please. A couple of examples of the level of detail that our team is at right now as we've identified, again, that range of options. You can see on your right an example of a bridge alignment option detail. So fat lines, preliminary sketches, reinforcing that we are not bringing a fully baked cake and we have not been making decisions, but we are developing designs to generate data. On the right, you can see an example of transit option detail that show alignments, stations, and major transit components. Next slide, please. I promised a little bit deeper dive, as Deb likes to say, opening the box a bit on transit. There's been a lot of work over the summer months on transit. Our objectives were to make sure we developed options that supported the purpose and need and centered those transit options, like the rest of the project, with climate and equity in mind. We want to optimize a high capacity transit option to encourage ridership and create an attractive choice in a cost-effective way. And as, again, with the rest of the program, leveraging the previous planning and design, there's a lot of rich data we can draw from as we're looking at those changes. Also ensuring transit demand in the corridor fits into the long-term public transit networks for both states. And finally, integrating a new service across the bridge to the rest of the regional transit service. It's important to note that while we're taking a dive here and looking at transit, the solution will be part of an overall multimodal design solution for the bridge. We understand the interrelationship between transit and the rest of the pieces of the interstate bridge replacement solution. So wanted to reinforce that. Next slide, please. As we've mentioned the modeling, we are deep, as I'm speaking right now, deep into the modeling efforts for transit to evaluate trade-offs and performance for the options we're looking at. Three major pieces of this we are modeling to identify, to have that conversation on trade-offs and consideration of options with performance. We're also engaging with the Citizen Advisory Group and the Equity Advisory Group to get feedback on considerations such as access, connections, and priorities. And finally, integrating transit options and multimodal design options for screening, as I mentioned before. Off to the right, you can see an example of the evaluation measures that's coming out of that modeling work. And all of that will be fed into the larger screening activity that Chris mentioned earlier. Next slide. Just a focus here on equity and transit. Our team has been using the equity data that was presented previously here at ESG and the work our equity team's been doing to look at physical access to those stops and stations, local and regional mobility, and property impacts. You can see one of the tools we're using, an isochrone map that takes a look at distance to transit stations and overlaying that work with our new equity data to help guide design and guide screening. Next slide. We are also looking at a lot of measures, measures with transit and with the rest of the project related to climate. So ridership, boarding, mode of access, mode shift, extreme weather conditions, fostering walkable communities, and relative carbon impacts for construction and operation and maintenance. And you can see the climate framework off to the right that will look at creating options, providing input on construction and operations, and the environmental change and behavior change as we look at mode shifts related to transit. Next slide, please. So that's a little what we've been doing. Where are we headed now? Our design options, as you saw in the big timeline, is to more further develop the design options so that they can be in service of the screening activities. We are going to start with providing additional definition. And as you can see, local street connections, active transportation, as I mentioned before, and integrating our transit options into the rest of the design of the project. Also additional data generation and analysis, modeling, and refinement of the equity and climate data into that modeling and performance evaluation. And finally, we will screen options in November and December to evaluate performance. And you can see off to the right there an example of what we think are stitched together options, preliminary design options will look like prior to jumping into screening. I have one more slide, but I see there's a hand up. So we can go back to that. But really just to wrap up, as we head towards that solution, we are rapidly defining both the screening and the options to get to the end of October, where we can review those options, and November and December screening those. And then in early 22, the big lift of identifying that one IBR solution. I'll pause there and turn it back to Administrator Johnson.
Thank you, John. And President Peterson, we're going to get to your questions in just a second. So we put this in our information that we're presenting to you to demonstrate that we are seeking to be transparent as possible. We're seeking to be data-driven, and we're seeking to answer any questions regarding different scenarios that that come up that your staff may present to us. Once again, we have IGAs that are in the final throes, but that is not stopping staff members from doing the deep dive with us. So we have retroactivity for those IGAs. So we encourage you to talk to your staff members to make sure that any questions or concerns or scenarios that you have are being answered. So we're going to go into a group discussion that's going to talk about how this proposed approach is meeting your interests. We're also going to talk about in these next number of minutes, what suggestions or feedback do you have for improving the process, for making progress and the potential outcomes. And last but not least, this is Deb's infamous question. What are you wondering or worrying about? What concerns you about how we are stepping through this? And one last thing I want to add, we're going to be taking these to you so you can take back to your boards and councils and have them weigh in prior to that bi-state legislative meeting towards the end of March. So we want to make sure that the schedules of getting this information before your boards and councils is appropriate. And if we can start doing some of those things now, that would be critically important to keeping our timeline. So with that, Deb, I'm going to kick it back to you so we can start taking the questions.
Great. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, everybody. Just one quick process construct. I really, we have worked hard to give you some time to actually talk with each other. And for once, we are not pushing fast. We have, this feels like a luxury, but closer to 40, 45 minutes for some actual dialogue. And I know, in the big world of things, maybe that doesn't sound like much, but at other meetings, I think we did too much talking at you and we agreed to step it back. So we gave you a lot of information. We want to take your questions. We're glad to see your hand up, President Peterson. I was hoping we could start with just informal, folks, put your hands up, talk. Towards the end, I would like to head once around the virtual table just to get a check-in from each of you. And if I can throw out a process phase for this piece of the work, it gets messier before it gets tidier. We want to hear what's not working. We want to hear where you have some issues or concerns, because we're deep in the work, but we're not nearly finished with anything. So let's just get started and jump right in. And President Peterson, what's on your mind?
Thank you. First of all, I just want to thank Greg for coming. We've got you scheduled to come before the Metro Council and talk about the project. I think that is a great part of the partnership, and it will be a good conversation as the Metro Council starts to put together a resolution of what they expect to see in terms of outcomes, not specifics, but bigger outcomes that they want to see from the project and what kind of information we're going to need to make a decision. So I appreciate that. In order to get to that point, I have two questions. One is a bigger umbrella, and the other is very specific. The screening criteria, thank you very much for hearing us. I know that we've been talking a lot about making sure that we have performance metrics screening criteria. And while we're working on them in parallel, I just want to make sure that before any alternatives come out, we've had the full discussion about the screening criteria and are in alignment on that, because that will then feed to our ability to have a conversation about which of the alternatives in each of these smaller issue boxes, that they're not small issues, but they're not the entire bridge. I think that'll help. So I just want to make sure that the timing on that is screening criteria first and then alternatives in terms of process, even though you might be working in parallel in the background on developing both at the same time. That's the first one. And then second, we just wanted to clarify in the conversations around Hayden Island, we just wanted to make sure that one of the alternatives that was still on the table is the local bridge from basically from the Oregon side to the Hayden Island side as part of the development of alternatives within that relook.
Well, President Peterson, yes to both of those questions. That spinning wheel diagram that we've shown you guys numerous times, we will be using that to make sure that if we have missed anything, we can insert something back into that wheel to make sure that a screening criteria for a design option has been looked at and addressed. So no problem from that standpoint. Regarding Hayden Island, yes, we are looking at all of the options that are on the table that will make Hayden Island function and operate how the community sees it operating. So one of the key issues that that's a potential is right now the I-5 freeway touches down on Hayden Island at ground level, and it kind of divides the island. So with the potential replacement of the North Portland Harbor Bridge, that could lead to a situation to where we just have piers on Hayden Island and you get a reconnection of the island. So there are a lot of things that are being looked at, and nothing has been taken off the table at this point.
Thank you.
Greg, if I can have one bit, President Peterson, on the process with the desired outcomes and screening criteria. We are relying heavily on your program staff and teams over the next month. And we just talked to them about this yesterday. Chris explained how much progress we've made, but the next 2 to 3 weeks especially, we're going to be pushing hard for their alignment, like telling us, and Chris helped me with this, we want to get as specific as we can, like what are the desired outcomes that partners can agree on? How do we make sure that the screening criteria process and the criteria themselves resonate sufficiently? Nothing's going to be perfect, but we are pushing really hard to seek as much alignment as we can. And what we're bringing back to you, we'll send it to you before your October ESG meeting, so you have time to look at it, think about it, and make sure you understand it. But we will ask you at the October meeting, is this good enough to keep going? Because we heard you earlier in the year, you said, don't push us to start analyzing things unless you first asked us, are we aligned around the desired outcomes and the screening criteria process? So I just want to emphasize, we're getting really close on it, and keep on with the pushbacks. Did I say that right, Chris? Okay. All right. Thanks on that. I just wanted to reemphasize on that piece. Thanks. And thank you for pushing us. We're getting better product because of this, everybody. So we really do appreciate it. So Chris Warner's up next, and then Chris Strickler.
Yeah, I think you addressed what I was looking at a little bit, Deb, in terms of the desired outcomes and where we're going. Because I want to make sure that we get those well defined, because we're spending a lot of time talking about design options, and I know it's human nature to jump to the design options. But certainly, as we are trying to figure out what our desired outcomes are and how equity and all the other values that we have, I want to make sure that we don't lose track of getting those outcomes defined before we start really honing in on what the design options are. So please continue to work with our staff on trying to figure what that is, because as the city of Portland, we will have a heavy lift in terms of going back to our council and getting them up to speed. And unless we have those outcomes that really reflect the values of city council, it will be harder for us, notwithstanding the best design options in the world, of how do we get to something that we can support. So thank you for that.
So Chris, if I can just jump in, one of the things that we are focusing on, before we can get our partners accepting outcomes, what this thing will finally look like, we have got to have folks that are comfortable and feel that the process has been fair and open. So we are focusing on getting the process right and being data driven, removing bias from the processes that we are operating. So those things are key critical, as we're going to be asking this group sometime early next year what do you guys think? What do you think about what we've done and how we've done it? So that's going to be key to making sure that you guys are okay and okay with pushing us to the next phase.
Thank you, Greg. And Director Strickler, yes?
Yeah, thank you, Deb. Greg, I wanted to thank you for that response because much of what I was hoping to put out there was pretty consistent with what Chris and President Peterson put on the table. And I just want to, from our perspective, especially as it relates to the design details and the differentiation on Hayden Island and some of those things that you and the team are working through, I know you are going to do this, but I just want to put out there for all of us in this discussion and remember that the community should be driving those decisions as opposed to, individual agency preference on bridge types and things like that we can get hyper technical on. And I've appreciated your approach there. I know that's what you're doing. And I think that's important, especially as we work with a community that really only has two ways on and off an island. One right now, which is the interstate, the other is a boat. And so that's going to be really important as you look to put future solutions in play and recognize that community should be driving some of those outcomes. The question that I have is, and I don't know whether or not I need a ton of detail now, but it would help me to understand. So I think you've got a great plan leading up to a decision point for the project team and for the program so that you can hit the ground running on your next major milestone, which comes after some of that NEPA work. If there's a way, and it doesn't have to be this meeting, but a way to bring some understanding as to what those next steps are post kind of March to June timeframe next year, because I think that'll help us not just in our diligence of why it's so important to get to some of the dates, but it would certainly help me understand what kind of process pieces do we have in front of us in addition to getting to a preferred solution.
Well, thank you, Director Strickler. That's a great question. And our team is working on the broader timeline of what happens after March, what happens after we have talked to our federal partners. So that will be upcoming, and we will have that definitely in front of asking you to take us to the next step. We will demonstrate to you what the next steps are. And one of the reasons that this is so key critical, as many of you know, with the conversation that's going on nationally with infrastructure and infrastructure funding, with what's happening in the state legislatures about infrastructure funding, we need to be ready. And you will see our next extended timeline will be speaking to those type of issues of when is the dollars critical to be in place for the program? When are other key decisions, such as what the labor element will look like, what a community benefits agreement may look like? All of those things are going to be, they're going to start, and they're going to be reflected in that next tranche of information that we provide to you for a schedule.
Really helpful. Thank you. Great questions, really helpful feedback. Any other clarifying questions before I head once around the table? What I was thinking then I would do next is, Josh, can you help me just put back up those questions for a sec? And if it's helpful too, he can also then afterwards put back up that work plan. But Director Strickler, you're helping me. I always think about kind of like, I tend to work backwards from like, what's the ultimate deadline and how do you, I don't know, I have this phrase, kind of chunk the work out so that you see like, what are the milestones? What are we trying to head towards? And so when John Willis walked us through this bookending of from now till next spring, what we are going to be working on over these next 6-9 months is each time we chunk out bits of the work, and appreciate President Peterson. The first chunk is we're going to be seeking your alignment around those desired outcomes and the screening criteria process. We have been developing preliminary design options, but that's to get them ready for the second chunk of work, which is then taking those design options and being able to look at them and analyze them and sort through from a technical perspective with a whole lot of data, so that by the time we get through the screening process at the end of the year, what you will all have is a technical recommendation that we bring back to you in January. And so before we get to that piece that starts in January, we're right now saying, do these first chunks start to make sense to you? Can you picture kind of how the process is going to move them all forward? And we're really interested in making sure that the substance is matching up. So whatever you're hearing from your staff and your teams, if you have this, you know, as Greg says, for me, the wondering or worrying space about how it's moving along and why or why not, there's emphasis on different parts. And then at the highest level, we think of this as a place where on behalf of the region, we're leaning in with a lens that represents communities of concern and constituents and the equity and climate components that everybody's been working so hard to keep front and center. So as you've heard about where we're at and where we're going, I would just be grateful heading once around the table just to hear. Do you have any suggestions or feedback for improvements? Is it meeting regional partner interests? And how can we help keep that bar high to meet those interests? And then at this, are you wondering or worrying about anything? Or, you know, what are you hearing? What do you want to share here to help, again, keep the program on a successful pathway? So that's the framing around it. And then you tell us if there are other slides you want us to walk back to and share back with you. And if I could, I'd like to, and I hope you don't mind, Mayor McInerney Ogle, I was going to start with the cities, but you can tell me not to. I could ask you to go first, and then I'll be heading my way around the table.
Certainly, Deb. Thank you very much. Well, first of all, in regard to the approach that you've outlined, we absolutely want to thank you for taking our Vancouver desired outcomes. We spelled that out in our July resolution that was passed by Vancouver City Council, and we're seeing those in your analysis. So that's wonderful. The reason that was important is because the Vancouver City Council are voting members on the MPO for RTC and also on CTRAN. So that we needed to make sure that we had all of that information in those decisions. And I'm going to kind of bump over a little bit to the worry, because we're closing in on having enough time to make those solutions, to get that information to vote on things in the springtime. We need to make sure that we have enough time to lead up to the conversations so that we can vote on RTC and CTRAN. We need to make sure that we have all the materials in advance for those little steps leading up to all of those different votes. And that's probably one of our big concerns. It's kind of, Deb, if you would, and Greg, it's the when and the how. When will we be discussing it in this body, and how will that come so that we can share that with the Vancouver City Council so that they have time enough in the end in RTC and CTRAN to have those conversations and to vote. So the transit mode, when will we discuss it? What's the approach on that transit mode and the alignment and all the different pieces to that? The type and number of lanes on the bridge, the interchange designs on both sides, not just on Hayden Island, but also in Vancouver. The discussion of the North Portland Harbor Bridge, the Slough Bridge, if you would. But also we'll want to have that same conversation, and I know it's not one of your big questions, but the tolling strategies and the agreement on how tolling revenues will be used and prioritized will be important to us. So, for example, come March on 2022, are we seeking a full LPA for the roadways so that we know the number of lanes, how tolling looks and everything? But we just kind of need to know when and how on all of those, so that we can plan our work schedule with not just Vancouver staff, but with our councils, so that we have opportunities in RTC and with CTRAN.
So thank you, Mayor, for the question. And we know that there are a raft of other questions that have to be answered. But what we are doing with this, with the IBR solution, is setting the pillars, setting the foundation for getting to those other answers. We know that tolling is going to be a tremendously tough discussion, but first we have to define what it is we are building before we talk about how we are going to fund it.
Okay.
So those things will be reflected in that bigger schedule that we talked about. But one of the things.
So we're looking at the bridge, how to get on and off, and what it looks like for cars, transit, pedestrians, bicyclists on both sides, and what the bridge looks like, and that footprint, so to speak.
Yes, the what of what this thing is. The how, the tolling is a part of the how. Sure. The community benefits are part of the how. And those are questions that we have not forgotten about. We're keeping them at that second tier because we don't want to bite off more things than we can chew, but we will be coming back to all of our partners with specifics on those things, on tolling, on more equity, more climate. All of those things are going to be a part of how we get this thing done.
So Greg, in October, then when we reconvene, I hope we have some more clarity on that footprint and how we're going to have the approach. When will we be talking about the types and number of lanes, the interchanges, the on and off, the transit? How will we talk about that? Because really there's not a lot of time between October and March.
So one of the things that we're looking at is to get agreement in principle on some of the screening criteria in the October meeting, but the November and December meetings will be dedicated to exactly what you're talking about. What are the details of transit? What are the details of the lanes? What did we model? What did we look at? How did screening criteria help us define and narrow those down? So that November and December timeframes, and possibly even a bleed over into January, those are the discussions that will get to those specifics.
Okay. Good luck. We can do it. We're excited about it. We can do big things. We have a lot. We know there's a path forward on this. We'll be successful.
I agree.
Thank you. Thank you for the optimism. Can I go to your second piece of it? And Josh, will you put back up that work plan for just a sec? I want to be really specific with all of you because you're asking us a couple of specific questions. This is the one of your checkbacks with your council boards and commissions. You know, in a perfect world, when you're doing these kinds of collaborative processes, you do it 3 times. You do a really early information sharing. You do a mid to later point of this is where we're heading and what's likely to be coming towards you. And the third one is where you do the ask to council boards and commissions. What we think you've been doing this great kind of ongoing check-ins with your council boards and commissions. The 2 specific ones that you see here, these yellow dots, there is a request that and these can happen informally, but we're asking you at the end of October in your ESG meeting, this piece about desired outcomes and screening criteria. If there's a space somewhere in the fall to be able to do a checkpoint with, and I think Mayor Ann, you were really explaining it well about this, you know, what are the main touch points going to be on the content? This is about the content. And so if there's a place somewhere in the fall to be able to show this pathway up here, about where we're heading by the end of October with you and these conversations Greg is describing that are beginning to happen in November and December. That would be the one point. The other one is in the spring, and we will be bringing back to you as ESG members the best effort out of the technical work in early January. It is pretty tight. It's January and February that we're going to be working with you to talk about the policy trade-offs of different options. And it's an interesting space that you'll all be able to, it's a bit of playing in the sandbox of talking through these options and moving into what could be the IBR solution. And so the second checkpoint that goes back to council boards and commissions is after you as the ESG have had a chance to talk about that January, February piece and taking it to them somewhere late February, early March, so that we can hear back from you in March where you're all at, sufficient to have Administrator Johnson take your message to the Bi-State Legislative Committee at the end of March. Okay, so that's what these yellowish, I call them the yellow blobs, mean about the where the work moves. That's a very technical term, the yellow blobs. And if you watch how they progress, we really want to ensure that you're seeing how the content and the substance is moving. And we can work offline on all these pieces because you each have kind of different ways that you want to engage. For some of you, it's sufficient to be here and you have that authority. For others of you, you're going to need more checkbacks. Does that help somewhat with your other question about the when to do the checkbacks? And then we hear you loud and clear. We wrote a lot of notes on this, how important it is to open up the details, to let people really be engaging piece by piece so that we don't wait till the end, right? That's what I'm hearing you say. It's really important. Okay.
Absolutely, Deb, because the other piece is we don't make these decisions among ourselves. We are out in the community asking them. And when our community continues to ask, where are you with this project? We should be able to send them to one link that says, these are the big questions. This is how we're going to decide them or decide what, you know, the decision is going to be, when we will be doing it, what it entails, so that we bring the community along with us and we're not trying to teach them. They can go to a link and see, boom, 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 this is where it is, what it is, and how it's going to be decided. So yeah, we just need to bring everyone along and as much detail as easy as possible for everyone to get their hands on it.
Yeah, thank you for that. And the last piece is we put this work plan, we gave you a simplified one that only shows the technical work with ESG engagement. We have a really complicated work plan that shows the iterative nature through the community advisory group, the equity advisory group. We've got all of these different community working groups on technical topics and a massive community engagement outreach process with communities of concern, and all that's on the website. But please don't lose sight. We really just kind of blew up this one piece because today's focus was on the technical work. So that huge iteration is going on.
And Deb, as you mentioned that, we have a commitment from the Bi-State Ledge that they would like to meet with us monthly. So our next Bi-State Ledge meeting is on Friday, and they're going to be meeting with us throughout this time period. Once again, for with the idea of they don't want a fully baked and decorated cake. So they're going to be walking this path with us to understand the concerns. They've also asked that we bring members of the different groups, whether it's ESG, Community Advisory Group, or Equity Advisory Group, to Bi-State, so they can talk to them directly and ask how things are going, what they think about the process. So it's going to be a very hard charging time with a lot of meetings and a lot of moving parts, but we're up to the challenge.
Great. Well, thank you. I have a feeling a lot of your questions were ones that others were thinking, but let me keep heading around the table. And Chris Warner, on behalf of City of Portland, thoughts, questions, concerns?
Yeah, hey, thanks, Deb. Thank you, and thank you to Mayor the mayor for outlining many of the things we've been thinking about. One thing I do want to say is, in terms of feedback, is we're very pleased with the work of the program management group in terms of what they've been able to do and drive us towards consensus. So that's something we're very excited about. Obviously there's still lots of work to do. You mentioned tolling. We haven't really had a discussion about congestion pricing in the work plan, because to me, that is one thing that could not only impact the financing of the bridge, but the need for a different lane configuration or things like that. So in terms of how do we use that as part of the methodology as we're moving forward, I think is really important for us in order to get to a consensus model. Also, I still want to stress in working through our climate and equity goals and how we continue to center those. I think that's something we need to continue to do. Certainly something we worry about is, given kind of the summer we've had and what we're doing, climate has been really taken to the kind of the top of many people's lists. And so more that we can lead on climate in ways that we can address both climate and equity in terms of all the work we're doing, I think that is going to be paramount for us to be successful. So I'll let some others speak at this point. So thanks.
Well, and
so Chris, thank you for those comments. Regarding congestion pricing, we are in our modeling, we are looking at congestion pricing that has been proposed by ODOT, and that is a part of what we will model going forward. So when we say tolling, we consider tolling as the overarching umbrella, and that congestion pricing is one of the techniques under that umbrella. So we will be looking at that and considering that as part of the model of what we do. Regarding climate and equity, our blueprints for moving climate and equity and keeping that as a focus of the program is moving forward very well. Both of our principal climate officer and principal equity officer are talking to your staff. We're looking at creating a climate group that so they can have more regularly scheduled meetings that will be headed up by our principal climate officer, Sarah O'Jay. So a lot of good things on that front. They are not getting lost in this as we are putting these 4 pillars together. That still is a lens at which we're looking through these things. They're part of the screening criteria that will help define what this program is.
Great. Thank you, and thank you. And President Peterson, your hand's up. Yes.
Thank you. I just want to thank Chris for bringing this up. I know you're working very hard on the greenhouse gas emissions analysis, as well as how to pay for the bridge. I just want to be very clear on behalf of our council, because I know this is going to be the topic. It will be the topic of conversation at our council as we go through this, that I think from our perspective, we don't see congestion pricing as a financial final step. It is an input into transportation demand management and GHG emission reduction. And so I will not be able to have a council that will be able to make a decision on the bridge if the financials are later, and that's where the congestion pricing is discussed. So it will be too late, and we will have taken a decision on a concept that doesn't have that piece in it. So I just want to be really clear about what we're going to need to see and the assumptions about that prior to taking a position on a preferred alternative, preferred next, whatever it is that we're making. I can't remember what the technical term is on the decision.
The IBR solution.
The IBR solution. Thank you for that. Yeah. So yeah, I just want to be very clear. We can't separate those out and put the congestion pricing tolling as the last piece.
So once again, congestion pricing that ODOT is working with, and we are coordinating very heavily with the ODOT's Office of Urban Mobility to make sure that we are understanding where they are at on congestion pricing. And that will be an input to our traffic modeling that will tell us what impacts that will have both upstream and downstream from the bridge that will impact the number of lanes, the size of the bridge. So those things will be part of how we get to the IBR solution. So the actual details of how it interfaces with the bridge, those things we will get there, but the concept and the modeling will take that into account before we ask you to give us a thumbs up or thumbs down on the IBR solution.
Okay, I think this is where we need a bunch of help with the coordination between the ODOT project and moving forward. Hi, Chris, I see you smiling. And this project, I think this needs to be hand in glove, not two separate things. I think for everybody's peace of mind of knowing exactly how much they're going to have to pay, when they're going to have to pay it, and what it does for the design of the bridge can't be two separate projects where we trust that ODOT's going to do one thing later, or trust that the bridge is going to do one thing, or have the possibility, and I don't mean to speak on behalf of the mayor, but have Vancouverites seeing more than one bill. So I'll turn it over to Mayor Ann, but I think this is the moment that we kind of all been waiting for, of like, how do we bring these things together?
Understood.
And Deb, if I can jump in, and that's exactly what we were talking about, is that for us to make those LPAs, to make that decision on transit, for example, we need to understand and come to an agreement on the tolling strategies, how the tolling revenue, whatever you want to call it, pricing or tolling, whatever, is used and prioritized as we are making decisions on whatever mode it is, all of this piece. I don't think we can leave it to the end, and our council needs to know, if this is the decision and this is the requirement, do we have the confidence that it's there? So Chris, I'm going to come back to you. I think ODOT may have the answer, and I think you just need to jump in and help with that decision. Sorry, Chris, I owe you a pie.
Well, I just want to check between Chris and Brendan. Brendan, I saw your camera also come on. If there's anything else you want to add, jump in or wave your hand.
Well, this is Chris. I think the piece that I would add is, so all great points, and candidly, those things have been top of mind for us for quite some time. One of the things that was in the genesis and the reason for creating the mobility office was because we were talking about individual projects in independent and different timelines, and we were talking about what they might serve or not serve as far as benefit to the overall system. And without a comprehensive understanding of what those things can do and how they complement each other across the board, there's really no way for us to really answer the question with some level of definitive nature, just what the benefits might be system-wide. And when I say system-wide, I'm not talking the roadway system by itself. I'm talking about the connection to transit, the connection to access for those that right now have restricted access or have historically been forgotten in the access conversation. So all of those things are really the foundational element as to why we created the Urban Mobility Office, understanding that this point was going to come at some point in the future. And it's a point that we all want. I mean, that's the other part that I would say is in some ways at times I find myself talking about something that's big, complex, and comprehensive. And boy, wouldn't it be easier to talk about things in an individual nature. The problem with that is, and this is the adage that I've used before, which, you know, works for some, not for everybody. but you eat an elephant one bite at a time. But if you ever forget that you're eating the elephant, you're going to be really uncomfortable halfway through that meal. And so we do need to talk about the whole elephant, and we need to talk about the individual bites and what they can contribute to as you're serving the entire region. And again, it's for all of those services that we provide across transportation as all of our jurisdictions, not just independent ones that come forward one project at a time. So that's my long-winded monologue to say I'm in agreement. We need to converge on the timing for each of these and have a real honest conversation about what we can accomplish and when, recognizing that not everything will come at the same time. But boy, we're smart people. We should be able to move a lot of things in parallel, even if they don't complete at the same time. And that's the conversation we need to be having. Brendan, did I steal your thunder, or did you have more to add there?
Director, I could not have articulated it better than you, so I think we can just leave the elephant right there. We're gearing up this work.
We'll keep it front and center. This is really helpful. Thank you. President Peterson, you were next on my list anyway, so anything else? Either suggestions, feedback, worrying space?
Just to reiterate what Mayor Ann has already put on the table, which is that as you've noted, the spinning diagram hopefully will spin off at some point, but it needs to reiterate around several times. And our council will need the room and time to have those conversations. So starting them in October, we as a council submitted a letter very early on in this process on the outcomes we wanted, but I think what we'll be looking at is a re-look of where are we in the process, what information do we still need, and make sure that those outcomes are still the outcomes that we expected as we go along. So no need for a response. I think it's just a marker in the sand of we need time to get through this at the local level on each of these rounds, which might take more than one conversation at the council level to get through.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much, President Peterson. So I'd like to go next to RTC. So hello, Chair Hughes.
Yeah, thank you. I can't really add any more than what Anna said. She did such a great job on that. But when it comes to the RTC, the timing is even more critical, I think, than Ann said it, because of all of the people in our group, they have to make their decisions. Then they all have to bring them back to RTC. We normally meet once a month. And so we're even further behind the boat as far as trying to get these decisions made. So the sooner the better they are in that. And the other thing, other than tolling, which we hear questions on, I appreciate the information that you have put on the website, Greg and everybody, about the alternatives to the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. Those are the questions we get. I get up in North County anyway, Clark County. And those are just great resources for us to point people to. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chair Hughes. So next, I'd like to go to TriMet and then CTRAN, then I'll go to ports.
Thank you, everyone. Steve Witter from TriMet. First, I want to say that I feel like the IBR team and the transit team are really starting to get in a groove, and we've had some really good conversations, so I do appreciate that. Greg, you talked about we're deciding on the what and the how, and I think there's been some great conversation about that. The project can't do one without some of the other, and vice versa. From a transit perspective, as we look at these alternatives, capital cost, operating cost, all of those are inputs into the viability of those alternatives, and we've looked at those things as we're analyzing alternatives as well. So whether it's a screening criteria, I don't think it rises to that occasion, but it gets me to my worry point. And my worry point is that this calendar is not overlaid with the federal capital investment grant process with FTA, and whether that's a rubber tired alternative, a steel wheeled alternative. We've heard pretty clearly about exclusive guideways. We really need to overlay that FTA process in this mix too, and not let one get left behind by the other. So I'm just excited TriMet's here and committed, and really appreciate the team's work. Thank you.
So Steve, we do have the FTA processes in mind. We did not want to put that as something that will cut off any of the design options that we're speaking to. So our folks are.
All I'm saying, Greg, is there's a bit of the how that needs to go into the what, specifically with TriMet. So that's all. Thank you.
Understood. And we have that in mind. As we get to what performs, then that's that part B of the conversation that gets carried forward. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us. And C-Tran.
Hi, yeah, I don't think that I have a whole lot to add. Thanks for covering that, Steve. I think that from our perspective, Mayor Ann covered a lot of our concerns, and that would be schedule. We do benefit in the fact that because RTC and City Council go over a lot of, and they have their meetings prior to the CTRAM board meetings. We're a little fortunate in that we can kind of piggyback and use some of those discussions before it gets to CTRAM board, but her concerns are still ours, because that would mean that they still do have to pass and have those discussions at those levels before they get to us. So the schedule's always kind of been our concern. I think we've discussed that in several levels of meetings, and I think that still holds true here. I will reiterate what Steve said, and I really think that the discussions with regard to transit have been very robust, very helpful, and are moving forward in a positive, open format. So I do appreciate the work that the team has been doing in that area.
It's great to hear, Monica. Thank you. Input really matters a lot. Very much appreciate it. And if next, I'd like to go to the port. So Port of Portland.
Thank you, Greg and Deb. First and foremost, we just want to make sure and share our support for the process to date. We know this has been a phenomenal amount of work by a lot of different folks representing different perspectives, and very much appreciate it and support the process. And appreciate the opportunity for our respective teams to be engaged in different aspects of the work. So I think a phenomenal job has been done there. You know, it's interesting, the ambitious timeline is part of what, you know, certainly has us worried, but that speaks to our larger worry, which has come up here several times, which is, how do we make sure that we are nesting in the larger conversations with the federal government and with the two states around funding and thinking about infrastructure? And so while it is an ambitious timeline, I very much appreciate that we're all rolling up our sleeves and figuring out how to get it done. And we've got, you know, all the smarts, I think, with all of the different groups engaging in this to get it done in that timeline, but recognize it's a lot of hard work, and just very much appreciate the momentum and that we continue to drive to meet the larger conversations. So thank you.
Kristen, thank you so much for those comments. And this is a tough lift that we're asking folks to do. We know that there may be necessity for special meetings. There may be necessity to do things that are out of the standard operating procedures for some groups. So we recognize the lift that we're asking, but it's tremendously important that we sync up with some of the bigger picture discussions that are going on. But one thing I want to speak to the ports. We have been requested to start a freight conversation sooner than later. So Ray Mabey, our deputy administrator, has been asked to lead that discussion, and he will be reaching out to you folks in the very near future, because one of those questions, or a couple of them, are relevant to the IBR solution. So we want to make sure those things are put on the table from a freight perspective. So expect some involvement coming up very soon.
Well, I don't want to speak for my colleague at the Port of Vancouver, but we're all in. So just tell us where and when, and we look forward to it.
Excellent.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. And I am heading next to you, Commissioner Berkman. So
Jack,
yes.
Thank you, Jack Berkman, Port of Vancouver. Thank you, Greg and Kristen. Yeah, completely agree. Starting these freight conversations is important to us. We also appreciate the information that's been presented about the design options that do not meet the purpose and need, because it helps us focus the conversations. When we have a lot of different options that are old and we know they're not meeting the purpose and need, it kind of waters down the focus that we can have on some of the freight conversations. But overall, we're pleased with the process and really appreciate the way our feedback's being incorporated into the screening criteria and the design option work. Yes, the timeline is really compressed for a project of this size, and it has taken a lot of staff time to review all this, but overall, that's working. We have no major concerns about the process at this time, and it's moving in the right direction.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. I want to note that Commissioner Hardesty has joined us. Welcome, City of Portland. We know you were double booked, and so we're really grateful you could find your way to the meeting. Thank you for that. Thank you. So I'm going to keep heading around this virtual table. Co-Chair Valentin, are you available for any reflections, remarks before I head to ODOT and WSDOT?
Well, we're a bit different as well, in many ways, no doubt, but from the rest of the group, in that we don't have that kind of formal governance process that needs to take place. But we are aligned in terms of the desire to, I forget what you said it, but detail by detail, piece by piece. I think many of us were kind of looking forward to digging in on bike paths or, other elements of the bridge. And so understanding that we'll do that as much as possible, but it's more likely to be a comprehensive package that we respond to is just, I guess, different, not than what has been expressly stated, but maybe what all of us kind of internally anticipated. So I think that's just something we're going to need to be attentive to. And as other commenters noted, as much as we can get it piece by piece, that would be appreciated, I think, by the membership.
Helpful to hear. Thank you for that. So I would like to go next. How about WSDOT? Carly Francis? And then I'll come back to you, Director Strickler. Okay.
Thanks. Part of this is really being here as WSDOT and listening to partners, because the strength of this project rests in strong unity from the region in speaking about how to move forward. And what I've heard in the dialogue today is some, clear, direct feedback about some of those important building blocks, which I think is really incredibly important and valuable. And sort of looking towards building to a yes and this spring. And so I just really appreciate that and the clarity in the conversation. I think there's also a space looking forward where ideas will be discussed, and there'll be some need to suspend disbelief around some of those items, because it's still, even with setting some of these big ideas to the wayside, there's still some kind of big ideas and stretch space in the conversation ahead. And appreciate the comments and the stress to the project team for navigating the schedule with you and the boards and councils work that's ahead, because it's so critical. So I just really appreciate the conversation today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being with us. And Director Strickler.
Thank you, Deb. So I'll just have a few comments, and that is, Starting first with a conversation that I recently had with somebody else that's on this Zoom call now, and it is a reflection on the things that we've already agreed to. So a recognition of the work that's been done to date. So as I express my appreciation to the project team for all the work that they've done, but then everybody else around this executive table that's helping to guide those efforts, I'm heartened because I do see kind of a decision point that has been in the rearview mirror for some time now, which is a decision to replace the bridge. And we're now moving forward with the what, the how, and the when. And I think those are important criteria as we go forward. I'd like to align myself with the comments around as we move forward with those decisions, we need to center the community, we need to center equity, we need to center what benefits we can bring for what we know is a climate crisis within the transportation sector. And so all of those factors need to be within the kind of that values basis that I think we heard from Director Warner earlier and President Peterson and others for that matter. Lastly, I think I'll say I heard from a mentor of mine quite some time ago this statement, and it was a decision made through a process of indecision is not a decision to be proud of. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. And so with that, I appreciate Greg, you and the team and everybody else being willing to have the hard conversations around some things that we have in front of us and recognizing that those hard conversations don't get any better with time. So let's have them. Let's work through the issues. Let's figure out what this needs to look like so that we have something in the end that we can all be proud of. And let's do so with some diligence because this problem hasn't gone away and it's not going to go away. And we need to continue working towards it. So I'll close with my appreciation and I will spare you all the things that I worry about every night because you don't have enough time left in your day. So thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Director Strickler. Appreciate the words. So Greg, as we wrap up this piece, I wanted to give you a minute if you had any reflections. Right, I'm going to head to public comment in just a minute. And so I do want to say if anybody's interested in public comment and you're over in the YouTube, you have to hop over to the Zoom meeting to get your hand raised to get in the queue. And just anything else, Greg, just reflecting, wrapping up on this discussion piece.
I just want to thank everybody for their thoughtful input. This machine has many moving parts, and you're seeing we're attaching wheels as the machine is moving. So this is incredibly important work. And once again, we want to get to a point to where folks are absolutely in love with the process that we have taken you through, and that it's been transparent, that it's been data driven, and all of your questions that you've had have been answered. So please keep bringing your ideas and thoughts to the table. We want no surprises come early next year. We want to make sure that we have answered everything and put you in a position to raise your hand to say yes to this.
Great, thank you for that, Director Administrator. And Administrator Johnson, the other piece I want to say is we are working to make the substantive outcome not just what people can live with, but what people are proud of. That the what and the how of building a bridge for this region is done in a way that people are going to stand arm in arm and support wherever you go. And so, I like to always say, let's push high, let's push the bar up as high as we can get it and then strive to get there. And if we can't, we'll figure out what to do about it. But at the same time, keeping this as a national example of how to do it right, how to do it best. So I just want to say that over the past 4 to 6 months of you pushing hard on us, we have shifted the what and the how because of your feedback. So keep pushing us hard. We changed things because you told us you didn't really think it was the right way to do it. So we took it back to the drawing board and shifted. So that's the course we're on to get to an outcome, the substantive outcome that we want all of you, your agencies, the constituents, the communities to support. So can't thank you enough. This meeting was really important to us as a way to head us through now and next spring. So kudos to all of you. for that. So we are now ready for the public input piece, and team, I think I have a couple of slides I always do. If you could put them up on the screen, I will do these fairly quickly and efficiently, and then you can also tell us if we have folks on deck to provide public input. So to make a verbal comment, if you have joined by Zoom, please click that raise hand feature. If you have joined by phone, press *9 to raise your hand. I will be calling on participants. You'll receive an unmute request. Please accept it. If you're commenting by phone, you dial *6 to unmute. We want you at the beginning to please provide your name and affiliation. Attendees will be allocated up to 2 minutes each for public comment, depending on the number of commenters, with a total for this section of 10 minutes total. If we run out of time and you don't have a chance to speak, please know you can provide comments after the meeting. We always coalesce all those written comments that we receive and provide it in advance of the next meeting. So it looks like, I think we have 3 comments. Is there another slide for me, or are we ready to go? Oh, here it is. To submit after the meeting, fill out the comment form on the program website or email comments to info@interstatebridge.org with ESG Public Comment in the subject line. As I said before, you can call 888-503-6735 and state ESG Public Comment in your message. All written comments must be received prior to 48 hours in advance of each upcoming meeting in order to be distributed to ESG members. Comments received after that point will be distributed to members in advance of the next meeting. All comments are also posted on the IBR website. So now I think we're ready to go. Okay, and great. I think we've got our first hand up, and team, you can help me if we need to. Sorry, I've got my screen. Don't start it yet. My screen was kind of glitching out. Team, can you tell me who's up first? Somebody wants to come off mute.
We have Dave Rowe.
Okay, thank you. So Dave Rowe, if you want to go ahead and unmute and introduce yourself, we'll give you 2 minutes. Dave, can you hear us? See his hand.
Okay, can I hear you? All
Yes,
right.
now I can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Dave Rowe, and you talk about the transit options of bus and light rail, but regional rail should be studied as well. The solution to climate change is to add electric regional passenger trains to the existing rail corridors from Battleground, Ridgefield, and Camas. The reduction of fossil fuel is enormous because a 40 passenger diesel bus consumes 1 gallon of diesel to go 5.5 miles. Electric bus uses 2.3 kilowatt hours per mile, which is equivalent to 27 miles per gallon. But a 150 passenger electric rail car uses 3.5 kilowatt hours for electricity miles. And Stadler battery-powered rail cars are running in Germany, where they're moving away from fossil fuel. So the Cascades train crosses the Columbia in 15 minutes from Vancouver to Portland. So adding additional rail capacity to existing rail corridors is less costly than adding freeway lanes or expanding light rail. A public-private solution is possible, and IBR program should study this reasonable solution. The Burlington Northern, Santa Fe, and Union Pacific might be open to these solutions because passenger rail and freight movements have common solutions. So this is what I think we should add for transit options: bus, light rail, and also regional passengers. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe, for joining us, and thank you for being a part of this process. Next up, Bob Ortblad. Hello, welcome.
Hello, this is Bob. I'm Bob Ortblad, a Washington resident and civil engineer. I want to make 3 brief points this afternoon. First, a new I-5 bridge will be the steepest and most dangerous interstate bridge in the country. Second, the IBR administration has made a serious error in their evaluation of a safer immersed tube tunnel option. And third, after a decade of study and debate, Vancouver, British Columbia has chosen to build a new immersed tube tunnel under the Fraser River. The I-5
and 205 bridges have frequent severe wind, rain, fog, and black ice. The 205 bridge is the 8th most accident-prone site in the country. The IBR wants to build a more dangerous I-5 bridge with an extreme 4% grade, curvature, and limited sight distance. To disqualify a safer immersed tube tunnel, the IBR administration has issued an inaccurate and misleading report. This report was prepared by 17 WSP consultants and located a proposed immersed tube tunnel under the wrong barge channel. This resulted in an overly steep, long, and costly design. A peer review of this report by an independent, qualified immersed tube tunnel engineering firm should be done. For over 60 years, an immersed tube tunnel under the Fraser River has served Metro Vancouver, British Columbia. British Columbia studied and debated a new bridge or tunnel for over a decade. Last month, British Columbia chose a new immersed tube tunnel. Please review my public comment. It's on the website. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being with us, Mr. Ortbod, and thank you for your participation and efforts. Next up, Sarah Inarone, welcome.
Hi everyone, Sarah Iannarone, Executive Director of the Street Trust here. Thank you so much for all of your time you're putting into this. I know that our community values it. I wanted to just point out a few things. I did submit a brief memo for you and I'm not going to read it, but I did want to note that I do agree with the committee members who want us to be clear about two things before we start talking about design, which is where's the money going to come from and what are we building for? And both of those do mean that we do need to at least significantly be along in the process with regard to congestion pricing region-wide. Our modeling depends on that. And we also need to think about our performance metrics. I did include a talking point, and I apologize, there was a bit of a typo. I used the acronym NPO when I meant MPO, but you know, Colorado is looking at a planning rule so that we have to think about GHG reduction on the front end of our projects. And we should be thinking about VMT reduction, GHG reduction, air quality in the design of this bridge. And that should inform, in large part, the modes that we prioritize moving across this. I also want to highlight that I do think it's going to be important to think carefully about rail. I disagree with dismissing high-speed rail just now. We haven't seen what's coming out of DC, and we may need to think about it going across in this part of the region, in this corridor, and we might want to not dismiss that out of hand just yet. And I also think there's going to be a lot of pressure to move us away from LRT. And we need to, I believe, make sure that we're doing our modeling in ways that accurately account for the future that we're trying to realize, not just the present moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being with us, and thank you so much for your participation and efforts. And to all of our audience, to all of our listeners, we're so grateful and appreciative that you are part of this process and it makes a difference. So thank you all. Hang on one sec. I'm transitioning us back over for our last piece of the meeting. And Commissioner Hardesty, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if there's anything you had wished you could have said, Chris Warner did a great job sitting in as your alternate, and just wanted to give you a moment if you wanted to speak or say hello or anything else before I do wrap up. Oh, we lost. There you are.
Oh, I ran away. I ran away when you told me to talk. I just want to thank Chris for stepping in when I was not able to be here today. It sounds like it was an extremely productive conversation, and I look forward to reading the notes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. So to all of you, we're so grateful that you've been with us today. We are now in the wrap-up phase of the meeting, and there are just a couple key points that I want to make, and then we'll hand it back to you, Administrator Johnson, to close. Today, we did not focus on a number of really important activities, one of which are the community working groups. we mentioned it at your July meeting, but just really powerful opportunities for specific focused engagement on specific substantive topics. And so on the website, it lists all 4 of those community working groups. It talks about their schedule. They already had orientation. They're going to be kicking off full steam ahead over the next number of months. And at your next meeting, we'll dive back into it and just make sure that on a regular basis, if there's anything else we can do to help these components of the work stay credible to all of you, let us know, okay? The other is that we are going to be kicking off a fall community engagement process. These are always running in the background, but there will be another big lift that is already planned and ready to go that is going to mirror the kind of work we're doing here with you at the executive steering group that adds this really important foundational piece to the community advisory group, equity advisory group, and our process. And so it's just all these different inputs and lenses are happening concurrently. So I'll give you an update on that piece again at your October meeting. And then the 2 critical pieces of work at your October 21st meeting are this piece we've talked a number of times today, the seeking alignment and an agreement in principle on desired outcomes, screening criteria, and the screening process itself. So those components will be put in front of you. We will prepare you with as much information as we can provide in advance. And as I said, we're relying heavily on your team experts over the next coming weeks to help prepare those and get them ready. The second piece is this progress on developing design options. So the work's been moving forward. We've shared as much as we could at this point, but in October, we'll come back with some more on that piece. And then I think based on some of your feedback today, we'll make sure that at that last piece of the October meeting, we queue up the next pieces November, December, January, February. We heard loud and clear from you today that we've got to be as specific as possible. Otherwise, you can't do your work well. So let us make sure that we bring that back well in that October timeframe and that we're all queued up for the stages going forward. Those, every time we say the 2 hours will go fast, and we just appreciate your attentiveness. I'd say we get a lot done in a short amount of time with this group. So appreciate all of your hard work and efforts. So Greg, that's what I had as a wrap up. Back to you for closing comments.
So I want to thank everybody. And I also want to point out that our program is getting some great attention nationally. Our team, our equity team, has been asked to make presentations before Federal Highway Administration on how we are looking at equity and the nexus of equity and climate. So that will be towards late next month. Also earlier in October, myself and our chief equity or our principal equity officer have been asked to participate in a national small business /DBE seminar, speaking to the efforts that we are putting underway to engage the community in an equity-based mega project. So a lot of good things happening. We're doing some things that are worthy of national conversation. So just letting you know that the team is working hard. We're getting there, and we're going to answer all of those questions and have things teed up for you and ready to move forward. So thank you so much for your time and attention.
Thank you, everybody. Stay safe and healthy. Meeting adjourned. Take care.